Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
There's a school of thought that says EQ cannot be taught, and that's not the case. And that's what I love about the Enneagram, because it can help us illuminate our patterns of thinking, feeling, behaving, and helping us become more responsible with our own actions and showing us how different types, if you will, or styles of showing up in the world can be different than ours, but equally valid and important. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Self Smarter podcast. Today, we're diving into one of our favorite topics, the Enneagram. If you've listened to any of our previous episodes, you definitely know that this is something that we're passionate about, so you're probably not surprised that we're going to go into this wonderful topic. I'm Megan, and I'm here with my co-host, Danelle. Hello, friend. How are you today?
I'm terrific. You?
Great. It's been quite the couple of weeks, hasn't it?
I'd say. I want to update all of our listeners. In the last several weeks, we've taken some big steps as a company. Obviously, we started this podcast, but we've also been working for 2 years, and we announced and transitioned the leadership at our company. By the time this airs, it'll be about 2 weeks. So I hope we can all start with congratulating Megan. She's the new president of DMA Solutions. So it's a big deal and big, exciting time for our company. So I hope you will, if you haven't already, join me in congratulating Megan. And Mackenzie, there's been a lot with this transition. There's a number of promotions that have been occurring and new creations of new roles. This is all part of a 5-year strategic plan we've been working on, and the succession piece has been in the works for 2 years. So it's surreal to finally be talking about it outside of the walls of our company, and just to see the reaction and everyone's support of this journey we've been on, and certainly to see you and Mackenzie and some of the other leaders and people who've been with the company, and definitely Marcy, for 17 years. We're turning 18, just to see the continued support. So it's been a great 2 weeks.
It has. Thank you so much for making it so special and for trusting me. I'm certainly never going to fill in your footsteps, but following your footsteps for sure. And you are not going anywhere.
Oh, I'm going to go a lot of places.
You are.
Yeah.
You are.
But
yes, you will reign supreme as CEO, founder, and chief visionary and cultural ambassador, which is perfect for you and for our listeners too, because all of your experiences are what have gotten us to the point where we feel comfortable talking about this in a vulnerable way on this podcast. So
Absolutely.
It's all happening, Danelle. Thank you.
I know. I can't believe it. I'm so proud and excited for our future. I know the company is headed, and not only was there a transition of leadership, but we've expanded. We've been working on that expansion for about 2 years, expanding into beyond fresh produce, into good for you foods, floral industry, association and nonprofit works, especially the nonprofits that focus on food-related items. So the expansion's also been part of the 5-year strategic plan, and we're on a roll and just excited. So,
yep. And
great day.
Would not have happened without the Enneagram.
Correct.
Yes, which is not the reason, but one of the reasons why we're so passionate about it, because we knew where we were headed as a business. We knew what the transitions needed to look like. We knew they weren't going to be easy all the time. And we knew out of the gate that we needed to get really smart about ourselves.
Correct.
So let's just kick this off.
All right.
So what the heck is the Enneagram? I mean, I know we talk about it all the time. So tell us, those that are not familiar or even that are, what is the Enneagram?
Well, first of all, there's so many descriptions, so many definitions. And the reason why is because the Enneagram has literally been around for ages. Its history is a little bit uncertain, but from what I've studied, it's appeared both in Asia and the Middle East thousands of years ago. So if you can think about it in that in that way, this is not new. What's
Right.
interesting is it's just really become mainstream in our culture, from what I can tell, in the last 10 to 15 years. And for us, we found it about 6 years ago. I think a good descriptor of it is it can be described as an ancient personality theory that helps categorize humanity into one of 9 unique groups. But identity theory might be a better way to think of it. So identity versus personality.
Got it. So, there are other tests and personality tests out there and available, and we've likely taken them.
I know we've taken a lot of them.
But what I'm hearing you say, and what I think the listeners are picking up on, is that the Enneagram is deeper than your average personality test. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. So other personality tests, the way I can see it working for us is they might tell you what about you, or talk about the hows, like how you approach something, from like communication to conflict, you name it. But the Enneagram uncovers the why behind how we think, act, and feel. Basically, how we navigate life. And I think that, to me, is why it stands out as being so different. And it invites us to take a deeper look into ourselves. And quite frankly, it's touted as the most effective tool for, I love this, personal liberation. And we can speak to that, and we will in this episode. But that's literally what it's done for us, is it's provided personal liberation for us, and from what we understand, which then, when personal liberation also includes you opening yourself up to how others are and how they're wired. And I love this this description from an expert. Is it's referred to as a sacred map for our souls. And the Enneagram is a map that, when understood, helps us see our true identity. So those are some ways of how it's different. It's just deeper, and it has a lot more nuance to it. Say, in comparison to the Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs is pretty rigid. It's pretty straightforward, and there's 16 types. So I'm easily going to gravitate toward 9 over 16. But it's a lot more rigid, whereas the Enneagram helps us to see the nuances of the human condition. I mean, we're kind of complex. We're not necessarily meant to be fit into one box or another. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Hello, Self-Smarter leaders. I have some exciting and game-changing news for you today. At long last, we've developed an Enneagram tool that you are going to want to sink your teeth into as you prepare for the new year coming soon. I'm so excited to share this with you. So here's what I want you to know. First of all, with this offer, you get 2 incredible resources all about the Enneagram for only $29. So happy Hanukkah and Merry Christmas to all of you. Okay, and what a great gift, too, to give to somebody. But when you purchase this Enneagram bundle, you receive, first, our document called Exploring the Enneagram, which we created ourselves, which comes in the form of an ebook and provides you with a comprehensive look at each of the 9 Enneagram types and the unique difference between each type's core fears, desires, motivations, coping behaviors, and so much more. All the things we talk about here on the podcast that you love. And we made it just for you, so it's easy to follow and digest. It's not overwhelming. And then secondly, in the bundle, you receive a second ebook titled Leadership in the Enneagram. This Enneagram tool aims to help you become a more informed and intentional leader so that you can guide your team to begin their own personal growth journey. What better gift can you bestow upon someone other than the gift of knowledge? So we want to bestow that on you first with that first document, Exploring the Enneagram, so that you can then turn around and lead someone else in light of the Enneagram with the Leadership and Enneagram ebook. You're going to love them both, and we've priced it to sell at that $29 price point, so you're welcome. Visit beselfsmarter.com and click on resources to get your Enneagram bundle today.
So you mentioned this already, but I think it's important to say there are 9 unique groups within the Enneagram, and they're called types. So as you're talking forward, I know you're going to be talking about the types.
Yes.
How do you like to describe those 9 types?
Okay, so I want to say this for our listeners' benefits. There are 9 types, but they are also commonly known as numbers.
Right.
So you'll hear us refer to them either way, either by types or numbers. But basically, they're the 9 distinct core motivations driving our human behavior. So think of the 9 numbers as mirrors of self-reflection. I mean, literally that's what it is. And one expert also refers to them as masks that help us to survive and cope through our lives. And so each type has its own core motivation that shapes our behavior. So determining your number is absolutely key. We only have one dominant number.
And so how does one go about determining their number?
Well, it's one of those things. There's a lot of opinions on how someone should do that. Some experts believe starting with a test. Some experts believe just study all 9 numbers and then, self-determine. Mm-hmm. At DMA, we start with a paid version of the test. There are free ones out there. So, but we take a comprehensive, it's 140 question. It takes about 40 minutes. And that test is from the Enneagram Institute. And it's also called the RETI test. So RHETI. And of course, all of this will be in our show notes on our website. But I think it's really important to note that the test by itself does not determine your dominant number. It does not.
Right.
But for us, it's definitely a starting point.
It is.
And it's so comprehensive, this test that we take, that it provides, it is to us the best way to start. And we've looked at a lot of different ways to do this.
Yeah. So if you're listening and you haven't taken the Enneagram, or even if you have and not taken this version, we love this one and trust the RETI, like she mentioned, RHETI. We'd love, you really need to give it a try. It's $12. It's very affordable. I mean, for a game changer in your life. How much would you invest?
Right.
What is $12 too much?
I don't even think you can buy a cocktail in Dallas for $12.
Right? Right. We can't certainly find ourselves in that glass, but we can find ourselves in the Enneagram. So definitely consider that. All right. Walk us through a little bit more about the Enneagram.
Okay. So it's important to understand that we all have the 9 numbers in us. And it's important that you understand all 9 numbers, because really what this is about is it's not just about you discovering yourself, but how you relate to others. So keep that in mind as we're thinking through this. If you take the RETI test, you'll receive a ranking score of all the 9 numbers. So it'll rank it for you, and that total over here to the right will be equal to 140 questions. And the results vary as they should, individual to individual. So some will score with a dominant score and others will tie. And so, again, for me, when I took the test, I had a top number. So there was not a tie at the top of mine. And so I was clearly a 7. And then the rest of the numbers played out from there, for instance. And then for you, you tied. You had a 9. You tied 9 and 2.
9 and 2.
9 and 2. And then, so what that says is that, and it's okay to have tied numbers. In fact, we just had the other day someone that we know took the test, and their top 3 numbers were a tie.
Yes.
So they definitely have some studying and some work to do, as we all do. The other thing I'll note about the test is that what we find is that a lot of people will take it from a lens of what you aspire, how you aspire to answer the questions versus really how you feel about it. And it can skew your results. And the reason why we know this to be true is because we have people, once they've made it so far in the interview process, we have candidates take the Enneagram. And so when you're trying to get a job and you're really wanting to show up, and, I can see where you are kind of pushing the answers a little bit and not really thinking through what's coming out of my heart or coming to mind right away. So I would, again, taking the test from a lens of true being honest with yourself will really help, because there are no bad numbers. Right. All 9 numbers are equally beautiful and important. And so what I'm leading to with all of that is to say, at the end of the day, no matter what test you take, no matter how you approach learning about the Enneagram, it's up to you to study. It's up to you to look at the characteristics so that you can accurately self-assess where you stand. And so we have people who may not have a tie, but they have a close top number and second number, but they go through all the homework and they do the work themselves. They interact with us, and we together, either with them, help them to determine, wait a minute, you tested maybe a 6, but you definitely are showing up as a 1.
Right.
And so there's, again, not one exact way to determine it, but it's just important that you pick your dominant number and that becomes the basis for your study going forward.
Okay. So we're going to give a little teaser next. You're going to walk us through all the 9 types. So as you're listening to this, I think it'd just be interesting if you haven't taken the Enneagram, or if you have, just to know how Danelle's describing the types, and see if you can find yourself or others in them.
Yes. So that's a fun. We're not supposed to type other people, but you just can't help yourself. You just can't help yourself. But before we dive into the 9 types, I do want to talk about the importance of the symbol. So the Enneagram literally is a Greek word, Ennea meaning 9. Okay. And then gram being something that's written or drawn. And in this instance, it refers to the 9 points on the Enneagram symbol. So I know a lot of you, maybe most of you, listen to our podcast and instead of watching it on YouTube, but it's important that you take a look at the symbol. So whether you pause and you just Google it real quick so that you can see how it's laid out. But definitely as you start to study it, the symbol itself has a lot of deep meaning. And so again, we have one number and one dominant number. You will determine for yourself what that is or work with others to determine what that is. But there are equally 4 other numbers that are important in this study. And they are called the wings and the arrows. And so we'll review that after we go through the 9 numbers. So I would just advise you as you're listening, if you already know your number, it's real easy to ignore the other numbers because you're like, wait, I'm going to wait till she gets to the 6 because that's what I am. If you want to get the most out of this experience, you do need to learn all the 9 numbers, at least from a concept standpoint. And so, but there are 4 other numbers that directly impact your particular type. So just give you that tidbit as we walk through the 9 numbers.
Perfect.
All right. Well, let's dive in. If you look at the Enneagram, the actual Enneagram starts with the number 9. So a lot of what you may read starts with 9, but I'm just going to make it simple and go in order. And we're going to start with our type 1s. They are referred to as the reformer, also known as the perfectionist. 1s live in a place of serious emphasis on following the rules. They want to do things correctly, and they want to do them correctly all the time. They fear being imperfect and subsequently are often strict with themselves and others about getting things done right. 1s criticize themselves from the moment they wake up every day. Now, when I read that, it was hard for me to accept that, but our resident 1s agree with that assessment wholeheartedly, and they criticize themselves far more than they criticize anyone else. And so it's important to keep that in mind about them. What I love about 1s is that they're ethical and principled and a source of goodness and virtue in the world. And so we're so lucky that we have 3 of them on our team. And our Enneagram expert, who will be leading us through future episodes when we dive deeper into this topic, Marcy, is a 1, as well as our producer for this podcast, Jordan. And so their basic desires is to be good and to have integrity. Their basic fear, being bad, defective, or corrupt. And their little hearts long to hear, you are good. So that's the 1 in a nutshell.
Well, for our 1s, they are very good. They, how does this show up in the workplace? I'll just say fairly briefly, these are the people who are clutch. They will tell you things honestly as they see it through their lens. So if you're looking for a fair assessment of any given circumstance, they're the ones we call into our offices.
Absolutely.
Because we are going to get sound advice that has been already judged through many layers.
Yes. All right. Moving on to type 2. We know a lot about type 2s around here too, and I certainly do personally. Mackie, my daughter, is a 2. 2s are a source of love in the world, and 2s are willing to go the extra mile to find ways they can be helpful to those around them. They have a powerful desire to fit in and find a place where they belong in life and society. Their basic desire, easy, to feel love. Their basic fear is being unloved, or more so, and this is important, not being loved for who they are, but only for what they give others. I mean, they're the giver, they're the helper. So they lead with that. And what can happen is that they can tend to be loved for that particular part of themselves versus like truly who they are. So, and their heart longs to hear you are wanted and loved for being you. So,
yeah, these are the folks that you want in the bunker with you because they want to be with you.
absolutely.
And they're doing it not, I wouldn't say to please. I think that's diminishing the importance of it, but really to fulfill their needs, to be so helpful.
Absolutely.
They truly get joy from seeing other people thrive. And that is such a loving trait of theirs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So these are the types of people you definitely want to have on your team. These are the ones that are going to give you a hug when you need it. These are the ones that are going to come in and listen to you talk about whatever's going on in your life where you might need advice.
Absolutely. And we're really lucky. We have two incredibly giving, helpful twos on our team. So we're really blessed with that. All right. Moving on to type 3, the achiever, also known as the performer. They are, as you guessed, very ambitious. They are very conscious of their public image and feel very strongly about how other people view them. They worry about not being seen as valuable to others. And more than anything else, they fear failure. Their basic desire is to feel valuable. They have a quiet competitiveness rooted in their desire to prove themselves. So that's important to keep in mind because because they're deemed the performer, it can seem that they're an outward bunch, but that's not always the case. They're also performing internally too to seek that value. And so their basic fear is being worthless. And their hearts long to desire you are loved and valued for being yourself.
Mm-hmm. We don't have any 3s
currently
at the company but we have before. And one of the questions, once I realized they were 3s after they tested as 3 and identified that way, then I would ask them questions like, well, who are you doing this for? Or who are you worried about the most? You know, they really worry about person to person validation.
Correct.
As well as inside. So if I could identify that they were trying to identify self-value or my value or your value, that was a whole different, there was just a different ball game going on at all times with them relative to work. Yep. So if you know someone who's a 3, you love them. I mean, obviously they show up and they want to win.
Yes.
And that's an awesome thing. From a leadership perspective, the struggle and the challenges is who are they winning for?
Correct. So, all right. Type 4, the individualist and the art, also known as the artist. 4s just fascinate me. 4s value their uniqueness deeply, and they have a strong desire to experience deep and authentic emotions. More than anything, 4s fear being flawed, and they focus overly on how they are different from other people in the world. In fact, they know they're different, and so what they will do is they believe that the rules often don't apply to them. I mean, they can find exceptions in nearly every scenario, so that's something they have to watch out for. And they have a deep desire to be known and are in constant search of their own significance, which is why they have such a highly developed ability to see beauty in all things. So again, they're the artists. They lead with emotion and this insight. Their basic desire is to be themselves because they are known, and it's written in many of the sources out there that they're the most misunderstood of all the types. And their fear is having no identity or significance. And their hearts long to hear you are fully seen for who you are. So again, we currently do not have any type 4s on the team, but I really want one.
I know.
Can we just recruit for a type 4?
We should.
Yes.
All type 4s. Send resumes.
Yes, please. We are hiring, by the way.
We are.
And so we would love to have a type 4 show up and bring their beauty to our group. But all right, moving on. Type 5, the investigator, or also known as the observer. Above all else, type 5 seek knowledge and understanding of all the things in the world around them. So they want to know. They are very stay in their minds and their heads. As a matter of fact, they tend to be much more comfortable with data and information than with other people, which is very interesting. And we'll talk about why that is here in a second. And they deeply fear being overwhelmed by the needs of others and even of themselves. So they are they're known to be the most withdrawn of all the types. And their basic desire is to be capable and competent, which makes total sense. Their basic fear is being helpless or incapable. and their heart longs to hear your needs are not a problem. So that's the 5. So they are also, all of them, but they're also a very interesting type group of folks.
Don't have any 5s currently on our team. Haven't led a 5, actually. I've never led a 5.
Well, in some ways you haven't. We'll talk about that when we get to.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of 5 in me, so we'll talk about what that is. Type 6. Wow. The loyalist, also known as the guardian. We have a lot of 6s on our teams and in our personal lives. So we know a lot about 6s and we've learned a lot from them. But they are obsessed with being prepared for any problem and seeking security in every aspect of life. They have a deep fear of being unprepared and everything that might come their way. So they're constantly thinking not just 2 steps ahead.
No.
I'm talking 7
Futurists.
to 10. And they really fear being unable to protect themselves from danger. At their best, though, 6s are a source of determination and strength, and we certainly see that firsthand around here and in our personal lives. So that's what's beautiful about 6s. Basic desire is to have support and guidance, and their basic fear is being without that support and guidance. And then their heart longs to hear you are safe. So that's the 6 in a nutshell, and you happen to be married to one.
I am married to a 6, and I'm sure he's listening to this right now and thinking, wow, what's she going to say next? And I think, the thing I've learned the most from being married to a 6 that I'm able to apply at work and in leadership is to encourage them to live in the present moment and in the present time. Because they do have that tendency to jump so far into the future that they can't see today any longer. When they do focus on today, man, they are unstoppable forces.
But, there can be some of the strongest leaders.
Yes.
And honestly, friends that you can absolutely have.
That's right.
Because definitely for a 7.
That's right.
Who's sometimes not thinking of the worst case scenario and only thinking of the fun scenario.
Right. Trust is a huge issue for them, trusting themselves, trusting others.
Yes.
So once you earn it, you earn it.
Yeah. Hence the loyalist.
That's right.
All right. Type 7, the enthusiast, or also known as the epicure. Obviously, one of us knows a lot about this number. Actually, both of us do, because I am a 7, and we are known as the most energetic of all types. We're constantly on the lookout for the next fun thing, the next adventure.
Yes.
7s become bored very easy, and we fear being lonely, sad, and experiencing emotional pain. And because of this, we actively seek to stay busy, and we're constantly planning, thinking about what is next. And I saw this quote because, again, some of the stuff, listen, all of the numbers have a whole suitcase of baggage. But when I read that, and then I see stuff like quotes like this that really fill me up, is that 7s stay positive, hopeful, excessively curious, and 7s remind us all that we are alive. And when I see something like that, I can see myself in the goodness of being a 7 and being like, okay, that's a nice trait to have. And so I wanted to share that with my fellow 7s out there. Our basic desire is to be satisfied. Basic fear is being trapped in pain and deprivation. And our hearts long to hear you will be taken care of. So
you are, and I know that 7s are this way. You're kind of like the poster child for a 7. I think.
All right.
Poster, Enneagram 7, to know. But these are the ideas people on a team, the folks that love a creative brainstorm, like to pull the whole team into a room and let's get into it and like have some fun. They're definitely the fun generators. And you have taught me that. You and other 7s that we've worked with is do not forget to have fun while we're working, because it's very easy for other numbers to go right to the grit, like get down into it.
Yep.
Oh, well, what if we could be gritty and have fun at the same time? That's
Absolutely.
the best case. And you have definitely taught me that. And these are the people magnets. There's just sort of that unspoken thing that 7s have when they walk into a room. you can just almost feel their energy. So to me, 7s are very fascinating. And we won't get into the littles because there's a reason why 7s are that way. And one day we'll unpack that.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
But Danelle, you mentioned, fear of being trapped, and you certainly don't want to be pushing any 7s in a corner. I have tried and it did not go well. So I don't recommend that. Yeah. And then in terms of being taken care of, I think that's so interesting because I think on the outside, 7s look like they've got it all together. And I think you do. I do think you have it all together.
But that's not the truth.
Well,
we wouldn't have this podcast.
You have ideas about where you're headed. How about that?
Okay.
And I think sometimes you would like advice on, or just other perspectives on where we might go. So it's not about letting the 7 sort of take over. It's about being with the 7.
Yes.
Walking next to a 7.
And I think that's how we accept being cared for. It's like your ideas alone make us feel, again, cared for because you're sharing something with us. And so I think that can be kind of taken a little bit out of context, at least from my perspective, being as fiercely independent.
Yeah.
And what fills me up is taking care of other people.
Yeah.
But when I really learned about that particular aspect of the type 7, it's like, no, but I do appreciate when someone says, hey, I took a stab at this.
Yeah.
Here's whatever to move it along. I'm always so that really makes me feel complete is when someone makes that initiative, and that's in the home and as well as the office and friendships as well. So yeah.
Well, I'm glad I figured that out whenever I figured that out.
I'm glad you did too. Made it a lot easier.
Make it a lot easier on both of us.
All right, type 8, the challenger. And we have two both Mackenzie and Hannah on our team are challengers, and they're very different type 8s, but their underlying, the way they're wired is very similar. So they believe in themselves first and foremost, and they're always willing to stand up for what they believe in. And subsequently, they follow a lot. They focus a lot on being in charge and controlling the environment. Type 8s are deeply afraid of being powerless, and 8s can seem against everything, even when they agree, because that's how they foster trust. And so if you have an 8 in your life, until you figure that out, it can be really frustrating. And it can look like one of the things we've learned early on is that 8s require a lot of context. And so if you can show up having some facts on your side, having some contextual information around why something is or why you want to do X, Y, Z, it really helps the 8, because you definitely want an 8 in the foxhole with you.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're going to take care of you. Yeah. And they're going to stand up for what's right, and they're going to be the shield that we all need, and that's why they're so valuable to a team. Their basic desire is to protect themselves and others, and they fear being harmed, controlled, or violated. And their heart longs to heal here. You will not be betrayed.
Right.
And so they are, in their own way, loyalist, and they care deeply about shining a light on justice. If I can use that word, it might be a little extreme in the workplace.
Yeah,
but
it's very similar, I think, to the 1s. They are, because the 1s go through a process of judgment in order to form opinions. The 8s need the context first. The 1s are kind of more solo, thinking about it internally. And the 8s show up with a lot of external questions to help them form an opinion about what it is that they're going to stand for. But once they stand, they stand tall.
They stand tall.
So they're very convicted people. And if we can think about it from a protective standpoint, that's really what I have watched as watching Hannah and watching Mackenzie, of course, as long as I have, that the convictions are to protect.
Absolutely.
It's protecting a company. It's protecting a person. It's protecting them from themselves. It's protecting them from something. So if you're thinking about people who might be an 8 in your life, how do they show up when it comes to protection? Not that the 1s won't do that.
No.
But this is the 8's motivator.
Absolutely.
And so if they're going to step out there for you or for whatever they're standing for, they don't want to be betrayed.
Correct.
as a result of that. Like, don't hate me because I told you the truth, and don't hate me because I'm trying to protect us, even though you can't maybe see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's a valuable person to have on the team.
Yes. Speaking of valuable types to have on one's team, let's dive into type 9,
Ooh.
the peacemakers.
Yes.
Which obviously you are a type 9 as well as our Jessie is a wonderful type 9. You're both very reflective, so we've been able to learn so much about this particular number. 9s are extremely laid-back personality, and 9s tend to go with the flow and let other people take charge and make all the decisions, which is interesting. Because of this, 9s tend to be a little bit more passive than other types, and they fear pushing other people away due to prioritizing their own needs. Basic desire of a 9 is peace of mind and wholeness, which makes total sense. And their basic fear is loss, separation, fragmentation. And the 9's hearts long to hear your presence matters. So,
yeah. So these are the diplomats. I mean, they call it passive, and I know that's how they describe it a lot. I mean, we hear that a lot, Jessie and I. We talk about this a lot. But really, I like to think about it as diplomatic because I've also been labeled as that over the years, even when I was young. So you'll find, honestly, like, I'm not just trying to toot a 9 horn here, but you'll find if you look up famous 9s, there's a lot of presidents in the group there, because we have a way of trying to find middle ground versus always one side or the other. And so they are a good team member to have when trying to find balance, when trying to find unity in a crisis. I can easily step in and moderate. I do it at home.
yes.
With my 6 and my son. My son we don't know what he is. To be determined, he's 15. But between my husband and him, he obviously has he's not a 9. I can tell you that.
Right.
But I can step in and sort of try to help them see where the other one is coming from if they can't hear one another. So we have an ability to do that. We definitely have a fear of conflict, and I think we are severely misunderstood. But it's our fault that we're misunderstood because we're hiding the truth behind some sort of mask or lens that we're ashamed of. And that's the sad part of the 9. It wasn't an easy decision. You mentioned earlier I tied as a 9 and a 2, and I did, and it certainly would have been more fun to be a 2.
On the surface.
On the surface.
Yes.
But the 9 is sort of sad, really.
Oh, I mean,
there's some sadness with all of them.
Spoiler alert, all the numbers have some sadness to them. And I mean, believe me, we'll have a whole probably episode called the sadness of the Enneagram, because if you dive into this work, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And for those of you that are already on that path, you know exactly what we're referring to. And so, but again, part of this is just being aware and then deciding to do something about it. And so that's what makes this all fascinating. And I just want to give everybody a couple of facts before we go into some of the other areas about the Enneagram, is some things that we've learned and that we've been taught through this process, is that you don't change once you determine what your dominant number is, you don't change. And we'll talk to you in a minute about the relationship with the other numbers, but once that's in place, that's in place. And then what will change, though, is your level of what it's called integration, but you can change relative to your ability to be a healthy, say 7, for instance, an average one, or an unhealthy one. So that part of this, there is a spectrum that can exist relative to your personality, or again, the types, the Enneagram types. The numerical ranking of the type is not significant if you're taking a test where the numbers are ranked as for example, what we take, the READY test. That's not as significant as all the other aspects of what we're going to share with you. And then again, I cannot stress this enough. There are no numbers are better than worse. No. They're just what they are. Yes. And I think that's where it can feel that way when you're starting to study your dominant number or other numbers. It can feel that way, that there's a preferred number. In some cases, that could be the case. Depends on what the scenario is, right? It just depends on what's happening. There could be, we really need some ones to help us through this particular time or whatever it may be. And so I think that's where you can use the types in particular scenarios to create more, a better outcome for whatever you're trying to achieve. And that's relating into the the workplace scenario or group place scenario. It could be church or baseball team.
Right. I mean, it lays a landscape for empathy so that, you can utilize strategically the personalities to your advantage, quite frankly. I'm dealing with an XYZ problem. I need someone who thinks like this. Maybe I'll call in an 8 to tell me what they really think after they ask me a bunch of really good questions, or let me ask a 4. We don't work with a 4 currently. I know 4s, but let me see it from the emotional standpoint. Let me see it from artistic standpoint. So it's all about how you manipulate it and use it to your advantage. So now that we've talked about all of the numbers, there is a whole other aspect of the Enneagram that's very important when trying to determine your own number and your personality specifically.
Yeah, I would characterize it more as once you've determined your dominant number, there are 4 other numbers you need to pay close attention to get the most out of it.
Okay.
And I want to kind of pause here for a second. I want to let all of our listeners know, because that was a lot that we just walked through on the 9 numbers and then what I'm about to share with you here. We are somehow, some way, and they'll figure it out before this airs, we're going to share, DMA has an overview, let's just call it an overview, where all of this information, we're going to make it available to you. And I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll figure it out before this airs. But I want you to know that in case you're feverishly trying to take notes or thinking that you need to pause, to just let us get through the information. And then if you want to go back and certainly listen again, but know that we'll share all of this with you, because we want your journey to be a lot quicker than ours. And so again, not going to go too deep here, but when I refer to that there's 4 other numbers, first of all, there's what's called wings. So wings are easy. Wings are the 2 numbers on the either side of your number when you're looking at the Enneagram symbol. So again, if you're looking at the Enneagram, 9's at the top, kind of as the core of the Enneagram. And there's, again, a lot of learnings around that. And then it goes clockwise 1 through 8. And so your wing is simply the number on either side of your number. So I'm a 7. So I have a 6 wing and I have an 8 wing. You're a 9, you have an 8 wing, and you have a 1 wing. And so that's, again, knowing what your wings are, the numbers are, that's easy to identify. And what I like about this, and Marcy, again, our resident Enneagram expert, she talks about it being that it's so great because the Enneagram doesn't just put us into one box. It's not a reductionist tool. You're just this and that's all you are. And I can kind of feel that a little bit more with the Myers-Briggs and some of the other tests. But the way she describes it is, and so do some of the experts, is that it's like a color wheel that displays the blending of hue and shades around a vibrant circle. So I love to think about that. So it's a blending. So yes, I'm a 7, but I have so many traits of a 6 and an 8 when I'm either showing up in health or in stress. And so it's very interesting to learn about those other numbers, because they're equally as important to me being successful. And some like to refer to the wings as we would a bird. I mean, they help us stretch, grow, and even fly. And so your wings are important to, again, this journey of self-discovery. So, and then I'll give you a good example of, I'll give you, the example I'll give you about wings is that, again, we've been studying this for about 6 years. And a couple years in, it started to dawn on me as I was really reflecting on how I was showing up, is that I wear multiple hats around here. And the 2 hats are CEO is one hat. And then the other hat, which is very different, is owner. And depending on what the circumstance was, I realized that I was showing up in different ways to deal with those circumstances. And I could be conflicting at times. And what I realized is that as an owner, I'm really leaning into my 6 wing. So I'm future casting worst case scenarios in a lot of cases. And I have a lot of undue worry. Like I can't see the present. I can only see way out in front of me. And then in some cases when I'm an owner, I'm very confident and I'm determined. And so I can really become very aware of how my 6 wing is showing up in any given scenario. The same way with my 8 wing. And my 8 wing tends to be where I show up more as a CEO. And again, there's healthy and not so healthy versions of how I can show up into my 8 wing. But when I realized that, and I remember sharing that with the company, I could see especially with the discussion we had, it was eye-opening. It was like, oh, okay.
Oh.
She's in that moment leaning into a 6 wing, so she's doing these certain things. That makes total sense. She's wearing her owner hat right now. And so that's just an example of my personal self-discovery, utilizing the Enneagram to become a better version of myself and more self-aware, is that I could use my wings to help me navigate whatever scenario I was dealing with from an ownership seat and or a CEO seat. So that's an example of how we've been able to utilize that. So the next group of numbers, so you have your dominant number and then you have your 2 wing numbers. So the next 2 sets of numbers that you should really pay attention to, they're known as your arrows. And so, again, when you look at an Enneagram chart, make sure you're looking at one that actually shows the beginning and where the arrows are going. But this helps us know where we go in health and growth, and then the opposite, where we go in stress. Yeah. And then a lot of the literature calls this when we're integration and disintegration, but we like to just call it where we're going when we're growing, where we're going when we're stressing. So for each number, we have this version, and so there's a dynamic that exists within each Enneagram number that is triggered by our pressing into our growth and giving away to, quite frankly, our self-sabotage and stress. And so for a 7, I go to a 5. And when I was speaking to going through the types, 7s go to 5. So
in growth.
And thank you. And we go there. I can become 7s become very focused. When we're growing, we're focused. We can concentrate. We can create solutions to very specific problems. It's when, quite frankly, as a very extroverted person, it's when I would draw and really focus. And so once we started to learn this, and I know you would help me, you're like, Dee, we really need you to step away and go be a 5 for a while and really think on this particular thing for us instead of scrambling around and probably
visions.
Yes, we need you to go get focused. Yes. And so, and then 7s also, conversely, we go to 1s in stress. And so that means we become I become very critical, self-critical, and can easily become critical and nitpicky of others as well. Mm-hmm. And so my favorite story to tell about this is, again, Marcy's been with us 17 years. The company's 18, so it's easy to know Marcy's anniversary. And, throughout our time together, we would find ourselves in conflict, like butting heads. And we loved each other. We wanted to do this work, and so that wasn't the problem. But we could just easily get frustrated with one another, right, and not understand each other. And what we found early on in the Enneagram was that 7s go to 1, which Marcy is literally the poster child, if you will.
She is.
As a 1, I'm poster child of a 7. 7s go to 1 in stress. And so when she would be frustrated with me, I was probably
a lot like her.
Being very critical and maybe being a little bit... Again, I don't know what the other word is, but very nitpicky at times and needing things to show up in a particular way. And so that was enlightening. And the other thing to know is that 1s go to 7s when they're in growth. And so when they let go of their black and white worlds and they let go of their rules and things having to be a particular way, they show up a little bit more relaxed.
Which we call fun, Marcy.
We call fun Marcy. And so I think Marcy's fun being her true self, but we jokingly refer to her as that in those particular moments. But what happened between us once we realized that just knowing and seeing each other in that light, it changed things for us because all of a sudden we had a level of, not that we weren't empathetic for each other as women, mothers,
Sure.
friends, you know, walking through very similar chapters in lives. It's not that we couldn't be empathetic, but we couldn't truly see each other. And when we were able to use the Enneagram and this information, it's like we could just accept each other in that moment. And it doesn't mean that we knew how to show up for each other in a different way. I can't tell you. I mean, I remember laying in we were in a hotel room, and we were sitting there one night, and just like, wow, if we would have had this information early on, it probably would have saved ourselves a lot of, heartache. I mean, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
And, we talked about that, and it was a kind of an emotional moment of, this really helps. And so I can give you 100 examples, and you could give 200 more of those moments that when two people or a group of people are invested in this journey, how it can literally change the dynamic in a moment between two or more people that can put you on just such an aggressive path forward, whether that's a personal relationship, a professional relationship, it doesn't matter. And it comes from a place of understanding and choosing to see people for who they are, and understanding it enough to, in that moment, be able to direct yourself toward them in a healthier way, and also be able to kind of coach yourself when you're being unhealthy. And the same goes for your relationship with that person. So
Right. It really gives you permission to be yourself.
yes,
the Enneagram. And so when you're taking the test, when you're reading your results, just remember that that's the goal. The goal is to find you and first, and to help you empathize with others.
yes, and keeping in mind that we all relate to the numbers. I mean, there's again, I read, I want to be a 4. There's
Right.
times where I read about the 4 and I'm like, how beautiful.
Right.
And, we can aspire to pick the best traits of all the types and really lean into those things. So don't put yourself, again, into this one dominant space and just stay there.
Right.
Really explore the entire Enneagram wheel, if you will.
That's right.
So
at the end of the day, when you're thinking about the Enneagram, really what makes it important?
I think it comes down to the realization in our society, and certainly the workplace, is the importance of emotional intelligence.
Yes.
EQ. We're of a certain generation and we're still living through, if you're looking at the school systems, again, don't get me started on that, but IQ dominated
Yes.
this culture for generations. And don't get me wrong, I want the person who's flying the airplane or about to cut me open,
To know what they're doing.
IQ is extremely important, but we built so much structure in our culture around IQ. If you think of something, look at the SAT.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad to see some of those constructs being, not labeled as being the most important thing in the world, and we can't get there quick enough. But again, I think it comes down to emotional intelligence. And so emotional intelligence is simple. It's what you know about yourself, and the capacity and what you know about others, or your capacity to be able to work with other people. Yeah. So that's what makes up emotional intelligence. And like I said, I believe, and you can see it definitely in our organization. Yeah. If you've listened to the other 2 episodes, if not, it's the number one thing that we did to change the trajectory of our company, was to invest more in emotional intelligence, what we know about ourselves and we know about others, versus the IQ piece of what we've been investing in. So becoming the smartest marketers on the planet. And we still invest heavily in education and what we know about marketing. But we literally flipped the script and put way more emphasis, not just an investment in the learning piece, but operationalizing emotional intelligence within our company. And again, we talk a lot about that in episodes 2 and 3, and we'll continue to uncover how we did that in other episodes. But what I love about, what the Enneagram does is, there's a school of thought that says EQ cannot be taught. And that's not the case. And that's what I love about the Enneagram, because it can help us illuminate our patterns of thinking, feeling, behaving, and helping us become more responsible with our own actions, and showing us how different types, if you will, or styles of showing up in the world can be different than ours, but equally valid and important. And that's what, you're asking me the question, why it's so important, because the Enneagram is really helping us see the importance of emotional intelligence. And when you think about that, then we're able to improve our real skills of communication and interpersonal relationships, feedback, conflict, teamwork, decision-making, and quite frankly, leadership and becoming self-smarter. And so I think of all of the things that the Enneagram really delivers. It helps us become more emotionally intelligent. And again, I don't know that has been something people believe you're either born with it or you don't. You either have it or you don't.
That's
and
right.
I wholeheartedly disagree with that. And so that's why I think it's so important.
It is. And I know some of us, or at least for me, I know you and I have talked about this before, but I've been taught my entire life that people cannot change. People do not change. Well, they do. Mm-hmm. They can if they're willing to do the hard work and look inside and become self-smarter, investing their time. I mean, we've watched transformations happen right before our eyes.
Including my own.
Including you, including me. Mm-hmm. And we're watching it amongst the team members here at DMA and in our personal lives at home. So it's, as long as people are willing and recognizing who they are as individuals and what their strengths and what their weaknesses are, leaning into that versus running away from it.
Yes.
Is really the most important thing. And so for you and talking about EQ, this is the tool that will give you that permission.
Absolutely.
To be yourself and own it and be a better version of yourself, the most optimized version of yourself. Because you can't change who you're wired to be. You cannot. But you can change your behavior and mindset.
Yes.
And that is what the Enneagram really does. And it's really such a gift.
I agree. A $12 gift.
A $12 so easy gift for the rest of your life to serve you. Yes. So to wrap this up, really, so we've given folks a lot to digest today, but if you were to just list some bullet points in terms of what action items you recommend they take, what would you say?
Well, for those who haven't taken the test, this list might speak more to you, or if you've taken a free version, or if you took it and then you just kind of put it aside and you're now interested in really diving in. And for those of you who are well on the journey, I mean, anything I share here is a good reminder, because we have to remind ourselves of that. But first and foremost, you need to determine your dominant number. So you can take the test. We've told you what we prefer. All of that information will be in the show notes as well. And you need to study it, and you need to determine what your dominant number is. And then from there, I believe in really taking a deeper dive into the wings. So those two numbers on either side of your dominant number. And then I recommend understanding where you go in health or growth, and then definitely where you go into when you are in stress and what we also lovingly refer to as self-sabotage. And then I would say, for sure, the next thing to do is connect with other people. And even if that's just with us, we'd love to hear what your numbers are.
Absolutely.
And we're, again, it's not a journey to go on alone. And because it should be about you learning about you so that you can show up better for others, which means you also need to take care and interest in how others are and what types they are and how they're wired. And then, I don't know, maybe you insist the closest people to you in your life take it, because I will tell you, if you invest in this, you will want to know how other people are. And again, they say, do not type people, but you won't be able to help yourself.
You can't
unsee. No, you can't. And we love to guess.
Yes.
In fact, David with Snacks Media, who helps us produce this, he just took the test, and Jordan and Megan and I couldn't help but guess on what he was going to be. And I guessed right. So he's also a fellow 7. And so that's where I would tell people to do. I didn't mention a lot of the resources outside of the test from the Enneagram Institute, but we'll definitely put some of our favorite books and podcasts and honestly, Instagram handles that we like to follow that will be helpful for you on this journey, no matter if you're at the starting line or if you're in it a little bit at this point or all the way. So we'll definitely provide this list as well as some other resources that we think will be helpful for you.
And if you're proud of your number, we'd love for you to share it in a story on Instagram and tag us, and we'll share it too. It's just such a good way to lean in and really, if you're listening, we'd love to know what you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
We really care about that and celebrate you. Just on the gram. We'll do it.
On the gram.
All right, let's move on to music moments. This was a yummy topic today, and we can talk about the Enneagram all day.
We will.
And we
will have a lot more episodes. We'll get Marcy in here, and we kept it on the lighter side today, but Megan mentioned it a little bit. When you're diving into your Enneagram for the first time, when you're looking at your results, it can catch you off guard because the stuff that we have to work on can be pretty emotional. Yeah. And several of us were brought to tears the first time we read our results. And so there's a whole nother level to it, and that's equally important, but we'll save that. We'll save the Kleenex for another day.
For another day.
Maybe when I'm out of town. Yeah, because I'm a 7.
Exactly. Running from that, yes. All right, so for our music moment today, I thought it would be fun if we sort of align music with our Enneagram numbers.
Ooh, okay. And
you specifically. So you're an Enneagram 7.
I am.
Miss Enthusiast.
Yes.
What are some songs that you would say sort of encompass the Enneagram 7 enthusiast?
That's a loaded question. I don't know. Every song on the planet.
Song?
It's not every song.
Not the heartbreaks.
No. Having a good time, escaping, denial. All those things.
Surely there are 2 or 3 songs that you can think of.
Think about a good time. I don't know. Girls Just Want to Have Fun, Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Beastie Boys. I was in a conversation about 90s hip hop with some girlfriends this weekend. So you got to fight for your right to party. I think that's an easy one for our country folks. I'd say Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places.
Classic.
Again, fun times, so the fun songs. But then, I think there's some introspective songs, and I hear them all the time. And you will too. Once you're on this journey, you'll hear a song if you're into lyrics at all, and you'll be like, wow, I really relate to that. And it happened a while back when Miranda Lambert released her latest album in Bluebird. So that song Bluebird, if you're familiar, and the lyric in there is, I didn't want to be 34, so I just skipped on to 35.
Which I think you've tried to do.
I did.
Actually.
I've skipped a couple of numbers before.
Tried to do that. I wouldn't let you though. Pulled you back down.
Anyway, those are some that just quickly come to mind, but there's a whole list of them. What I'll tell you, for those of you who are on Spotify, you can go into the search bar and type in Enneagram, and there's this album that will come up called Atlas, and then type 1, Atlas type 2. This guy has written songs about each Enneagram type, and I can't tell you how spot on they are.
Wow.
And they're beautiful songs. And so if you want to give once you determine what your number is, give that a listen. It's a fun time. So
that is fun.
Yeah. What about you?
So the Peacemaker? 9, the Peacemaker. So you can imagine anything from the 60s and 70s. Comes to mind, but I would say one I've been thinking about actually over the last week is Imagine by John Lennon. That's a big one for 9s. I was also thinking, because you said Girls Just Want to Have Fun, I was thinking True Colors, which was one of my favorite songs.
Yes.
By Cyndi Lauper. I love that song.
Yep.
I was also thinking in the way of just like chillax, like totally whatever, Ventura Highway by America.
Okay.
So listen to that one if you haven't. It's a very cool song. But really, just if it was played at Woodstock.
Okay, go ahead.
If it was played at Woodstock, it's probably fair game.
Right. And if it's on any of Kenny Chesney's island music, all of it.
All of it.
That's the 9s.
Sure.
Okay.
That's where our headspace is most of the time, or what we're aspiring towards.
Okay, got
it. When you share your Enneagram number on Instagram and tag Self Smarter Podcast, we'd love to know what your favorite songs are that relate to your Enneagram number.
Absolutely. Fun.
All right. So just as a reminder, Janelle has mentioned this throughout. We're going to have, it sounds like a massive amount of show notes. We are.
Jordan will be so happy.
Jordan's going to be so happy. And so are the listeners that have acknowledged that they love the show notes.
Yes.
And so we're happy to do it. So look for that Enneagram overview and other information in the show notes going forward. The next week, mark your calendar for another launch of a new podcast. This time we're going to be diving into a book called The Ideal Team Player, authored by Patrick Lencioni, which Danelle has mentioned multiple times. He is a beacon of a role model for us, and also an Enneagram Type 9.
He is.
Yes, which I love. And so we're going to just get into that, and also how it internally has impacted our business.
Absolutely.
From a development standpoint. So Enneagram, high on the empathy, high on the trust, definitely a developmental tool. This one is more about ability, mindset, and how folks sort of show up.
Correct.
Yeah. So come to that, listen to that. We're excited to talk about it with you and to just keep going on this self-smarter path together. So as we wrap today, Danelle and I send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations again, Megan.
Thank you.
Newly appointed role.
Thanks.
Excited for you and everyone on the team and our clients and all the folks that we serve. Grateful.
Thank you. I am too.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcast. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming self-smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.